The dust hung thick over the valley like a shroud, turning the Afghan sun into a pale disk of light that offered no warmth. On the ridgeline, Second Lieutenant Marcus Vance pressed himself against the rocks, tasting copper and dirt, his rifle scope trained on the village below where nothing moved. Behind him, 23 Marines lay scattered among the boulders, conserving ammunition, conserving hope. They'd been pinned for 6 hours. The Taliban had them surrounded on 3 sides, dug into positions that turned the valley into a kill box. Vance had called for air support twice. Both times, command came back with the same message. Negative, all assets committed, hold position. Easy to say from an air-conditioned operations center 200 miles away. Corporal Deshaun Mitchell crawled up beside him, his left arm wrapped in a field dressing that was already soaked through. "Lieutenant, we've got maybe 2 hours of ammunition left, 3 if we're lucky." Mitchell didn't mention the wounded, they both knew. 6 men needed immediate evacuation, and the Taliban knew it too, which was why they were content to wait. The sun was setting. Night would belong to the enemy. Vance keyed his radio again, keeping his voice flat, professional, even though his hands were shaking. Checkpoint 7 to any airborne asset. We are troops in contact. Grid November Victor 427893. Requesting immediate close air support, over. Static, then more static. Then a voice that shouldn't have been there, calm as Sunday morning. Checkpoint 7, this is Reaper 26, I copy your transmission. Say coordinates again, over. The voice was female, which meant nothing, except that Vance hadn't heard any female pilots on the net all day. He rattled off the grid coordinates, his heart hammering against his ribs. Reaper 26, what's your aircraft type, over? The pause lasted 3 seconds too long. Checkpoint 7, I'm flying an A-10 Warthog. I'm carrying full ordnance and approximately 90 minutes of station time. Send me your target coordinates and mark your position. I'm 5 minutes out. Vance looked at Mitchell. Mitchell looked back. They both knew what 5 minutes meant when you had no air support scheduled, when all assets were committed elsewhere. It meant someone had broken protocol. It meant someone had ignored orders. It meant someone was coming anyway. The A-10 Thunderbolt II wasn't designed to look beautiful. It was designed to look like exactly what it was. A flying gun platform built around a 30mm rotary cannon that could shred tanks. When it appeared over the southern ridge, flying low enough that Vance could see the twin engines mounted high on the fuselage, the distinctive straight-wing silhouette, he felt something he hadn't felt in 6 hours. Not hope exactly, but something adjacent to it. The aircraft banked hard, revealing the underside bristling with missiles and the massive cannon in the nose. Checkpoint 7, Reaper 26 has you visual. I see smoke marking your position. Confirmed Taliban positions are northeast of your location, approximately 400 meters, over. Affirmative, Reaper, they're dug into the village structure, heavy machine guns and RPGs. We've got wounded and we're running low on everything. Copy, checkpoint. Stay down. First pass inbound in 30 seconds. The A-10 rolled inverted, then dove toward the village with a grace that seemed impossible for something that ugly. Vance heard the gun before he saw the tracers, a sound like the earth tearing itself apart, a mechanical roar that lasted 2 seconds and sent a stream of depleted uranium rounds into the nearest building. The structure simply ceased to exist. Dust and debris fountained upward. The Taliban machine gun position went silent. Good hits, Reaper, target destroyed. The A-10 pulled up, engine screaming, then circled back for another pass. This time it came in from the west, and Vance saw the missile separate from the wing, watched it track toward the compound where muzzle flashes had been winking moments before. The explosion lifted the roof off the building and scattered it across the valley floor. One by one, the enemy firing positions went dark. The Warthog worked methodically, each pass deliberate, each target carefully selected. Whoever was flying that thing knew exactly what she was doing. After the third pass, the radio crackled again. Checkpoint 7, how's it looking down there? Vance surveyed the valley. The Taliban had stopped shooting. Some were running, abandoning their positions, disappearing into the wadis and caves. Reaper 2-6, enemy is breaking contact. You just saved our lives. Can you stay overhead while we move our wounded? Roger that, checkpoint. I've got plenty of gas and plenty of ordnance. I'm not going anywhere until you're safe. There was something in her voice, not bravado, just certainty, like she'd made this promise before and kept it. Vance organized the withdrawal, while the A-10 circled overhead like a guardian angel, with titanium bathtubs for cockpits. They carried the wounded down from the ridge, covered by that distinctive silhouette against the darkening sky. It took 40 minutes to reach the evacuation zone. The whole time, Reaper 2-6 maintained her orbit, occasionally making a low pass just to remind anyone watching that she was still there, still armed, still willing. When the medevac helicopters finally arrived, escorted by a Apache that had apparently just freed up, Vance keyed his radio one last time. Reaper 2-6, Checkpoint 7. I don't know who you are, but thank you. You saved 23 Marines today. The response came back after a moment. Just doing my job, checkpoint. Glad I could help. Reaper 2-6 returning to base. The A-10 waggled its wings once, then turned southeast and disappeared into the twilight, engines fatting to silence. That night back at base, Vance tried to find out who had flown that sortie. The operations officer looked at the flight logs and frowned. There's no record of any A-10 in that sector today. All the warthogs were assigned to support operations near Kandahar. I'm telling you, an A-10 pulled our asses out of the fire. Call sign Reaper 2-6. The officer checked again, then shook his head. Reaper 2-6 isn't scheduled for rotation until next week. And according to this, that pilot wasn't supposed to be flying today at all. What's the pilot's name? Captain Alina Katsaros, but like I said, she wasn't on the flight schedule. Vance filed his after-action report with every detail he could remember. The brass would want to know why an unauthorized aircraft had broken radio silence and engaged without clearance. But he didn't care about the politics. 23 Marines had gone home because someone had decided that orders mattered less than lives. 3 days later, word spread through the base. Captain Katsaros had been grounded, pending investigation. She'd apparently ignored a direct order to remain at base, had taken off without authorization, and had engaged targets without proper coordination with the Air Operations Center. The official line was that she'd endangered lives through reckless behavior. Vance heard this and felt rage building in his chest. He wasn't the only one. Within hours, every Marine who'd been on that ridge started making noise. They wrote statements. They demanded to testify. They made it clear that whoever had grounded Captain Katsaros had better have a damn good explanation. The investigation took 2 weeks. During that time, Vance learned more about Alina Katsaros. She'd been flying A-10s for 6 years, had multiple deployments, had been recommended for commendations that somehow never materialized. Other pilots described her as technically perfect but difficult, someone who questioned orders, someone who didn't fit the mold. Reading between the lines, Vance understood. She was good at her job but not good at playing politics. She made people uncomfortable by being competent and female and unwilling to pretend otherwise. The unofficial stories were different. Other ground units had their own encounters with Reaper 2-6, a squad trapped in a minefield, guided to safety by a calm voice giving precise directions. A convoy ambushed at night, saved by a warthog that appeared out of nowhere and drove off the attackers. Always the same call sign. Always the same deliberate, methodical approach. Always that same calm voice on the radio. The pattern was clear. Captain Katsaros had a habit of being exactly where she wasn't supposed to be, exactly when someone needed her. The hearing finally took place in a prefab building that smelled like dust and air conditioning. Vance sat in the back row, in dress uniform, along with 12 other Marines from Checkpoint 7. The panel consisted of 3 field-grade officers who looked like they'd rather be anywhere else. Captain Alina Katsaros sat at the respondents' table, also in dress uniform, her posture perfect, her expression neutral. She was smaller than Vance had imagined, maybe 5'4", with dark hair pulled back in a regulation bun and eyes that didn't blink often. When she spoke, answering questions about her unauthorized flight, her voice was the same one he'd heard on the radio. Calm, precise, unshakable. "Captain Katsaros, you were ordered to remain at base due to maintenance concerns with your aircraft. Why did you disobey that order?" She didn't hesitate. "Because the maintenance concern was a faulty sensor that didn't affect flight safety or weapons systems, and because I heard a ground unit calling for air support that wasn't coming. The proper protocol would have been to notify the Air Operations Center and let them assign another asset. There were no other assets available. I checked. Every aircraft was committed. Those Marines were going to die waiting for proper protocol." One of the panel members leaned forward. "So you took it upon yourself to decide that your assessment of the situation was more important than the chain of command?" "No, sir. I took it upon myself to decide that 23 lives were more important than paperwork." The room went silent. Vance watched the panel exchange glances. This wasn't going the way they'd expected. Another officer spoke up, trying a different angle. "Captain, multiple pilots have reported that you have a pattern of improvising in the field, taking initiative beyond your assigned mission parameters." "Is that a question, sir?" "It's an observation. You seem to have difficulty following orders when you disagree with them." Katsaros looked at him for a long moment. "I have difficulty watching people die when I can help them, sir. If that's a character flaw, I'll own it." That's when Lieutenant Vance stood up. "Permission to speak, sir." The panel looked annoyed, but they nodded. Vance stepped forward, and suddenly all 12 Marines behind him stood too. "Captain Katsaros didn't just save our lives. She risked her career to do it. She knew she'd face this hearing. She knew she might be grounded permanently. She did it anyway. That's not recklessness. That's courage." One of the panel members started to respond, but Vance kept talking. "I've been in the Marines for 8 years. I've worked with a lot of pilots. Most of them are good. Some are great. But Captain Katsaros is different. She doesn't just fly missions. She completes them. And the reason she completes them is because she actually gives a damn whether we live or die." The hearing dragged on for 3 more hours, but the outcome was never really in doubt. You can't court-martial someone for being too good at saving lives. The panel issued a formal reprimand for unauthorized flight operations, added some language about the importance of following proper procedures, and cleared Katsaros to return to flight status. It was the military's way of saying, "We have to punish you, but we know you were right." After the hearing, Vance caught up with her in the parking area. She was walking alone, carrying her cover under one arm, looking tired. "Captain Katsaros," she turned, and up close he could see the fatigue in her eyes. "You're one of the Marines from Checkpoint 7. "Yes, ma'am, I wanted to thank you personally. You saved my life and the lives of my men." She nodded once. "You're welcome. I'm glad I could help." She started to turn away, but Vance stopped her. "Can I ask you something? Why'd you do it? You had to know you'd get in trouble." Katsaros looked past him toward the flight line where the A-10 sat in their revetments, ugly and functional and ready. "I had a brother," she said quietly. "Marine Corps infantry. He was killed in Fallujah when I was 19. His unit called for air support. It was delayed because of bad weather. He died waiting." She looked back at Vance. "I became a pilot so that wouldn't happen to someone else's brother. So when I hear Marines calling for help, I don't think about protocols or career advancement or what looks good on my record. I think about my brother bleeding out in the street, calling for help that never came." Vance didn't know what to say to that, so he just stood at attention and saluted. She returned the salute, got in her vehicle, and drove away. That conversation spread through the base faster than official communications. The story of Reaper 26 and why she flew the way she flew. Suddenly, the female pilot who didn't fit the mold became something else. The pilot who gave a damn. The pilot who remembered. The pilot who showed up. Over the next 6 months, Captain Alina Katsaros flew 47 more combat missions. She accumulated more close air support sorties than any other pilot in the squadron. Her performance reviews were flawless. And somehow, she kept finding herself in the right place at the right time, pulling units out of bad situations, staying on station longer than expected, making every bullet and every missile count. Other pilots started calling her the checkpoint angel, though never to her face. Command started assigning her the difficult missions, the ones where units were in trouble and needed someone reliable. She never complained. She just flew. One mission in particular stood out. A Special Forces team had been compromised during a reconnaissance patrol and was being pursued by a much larger enemy force through mountainous terrain. Night was falling. The team was exhausted, and the only close air support available was Reaper 26, flying alone because her wingman had mechanical issues. She stayed overhead for 3 hours, well beyond her scheduled station time, burning fuel she'd need for the flight home. She made multiple gun runs in near darkness, using night vision and the targeting pod to identify enemy positions within meters of friendly forces. When she finally had to return to base, she was running on fumes, barely enough fuel to make it back. The Special Forces team survived. The after-action report called it a textbook example of close air support in complex terrain. What the report didn't mention was that Katsaros had landed with less than 5 minutes of fuel remaining, or that she'd refused to leave station until the team reported they were safe, or that she'd violated minimum fuel protocols to do it. Word got around. Marines started requesting Reaper 26 specifically for high-risk operations. They trusted her. More than that, they believed in her. If you were in trouble and you heard that call sign on the radio, you knew you were going to be okay. Not because she was reckless or lucky, but because she was competent and committed and utterly unwilling to leave anyone behind. The brass noticed this too. Captain Katsaros became a problem of a different sort. She was too valuable to punish, too effective to ground, but still too unconventional to promote. She existed in a strange limbo where everyone respected what she did but nobody quite knew what to do with her. She didn't seem to care. She just kept flying. Then came the mission that would define her legacy. It was late March, and a marine company was conducting clearing operations in the Helmand province when they stumbled into a meeting of high-value Taliban targets. What should have been a routine patrol turned into a firefight involving more than 200 enemy combatants. The Marines were outnumbered 5-1, pinned down in an irrigation ditch with no cover and limited ammunition. The commanding officer, Captain James Rourke, sent out a desperate call for immediate air support, any available aircraft, any ordnance, anything that could break the enemy's attack before his Marines were overrun. The response from the Air Operations Center was grim. All aircraft were committed to a major operation 30 miles north. Estimated time to divert support was 90 minutes. Rourke looked at his watch, looked at his Marines, and knew they didn't have 90 minutes. That's when the radio crackled. "Ghost Company, this is Reaper 26. I'm 8 minutes from your position with full ordnance. Send me your coordinates and mark your front line. I'm coming in hot." Rourke didn't question it, didn't ask how she'd heard his call when she wasn't supposed to be on that frequency, didn't wonder why she was in the area when all aircraft were supposedly committed elsewhere. He just sent the coordinates and popped smoke. The A-10 came in low over the ridgeline, engine screaming, and opened up with the 30mm cannon. The sound was apocalyptic. The effect was immediate. The Taliban attack faltered as their positions were shredded by depleted uranium rounds moving at nearly 3,000 feet per second. Katsaros made 4 passes in rapid succession, each one perfectly placed, each one devastating. Then she switched to guided missiles, taking out enemy vehicles and heavy weapons positions with surgical precision. For 20 minutes, she worked that battlefield like a conductor leading an orchestra, each weapon system employed at exactly the right moment, each pass coordinated with the Marines' movements. When her ammunition was depleted, she continued to orbit overhead, using her presence to suppress enemy activity while Rourke organized a fighting withdrawal to more defensible positions. By the time other aircraft arrived to relieve her, Ghost Company had successfully broken contact and was moving toward the extraction zone. 0 friendly casualties, more than 80 confirmed enemy dead. It was the kind of one-sided victory that shouldn't have been possible given the initial circumstances. Rourke tried to thank her over the radio, but Katsaros was already gone, heading back to base to rearm and refuel in case someone else needed her. The after-action briefing turned into something else entirely. When command started questioning how Captain Katsaros had been monitoring Ghost Company's frequency and why she diverted from her assigned patrol route, every Marine officer in the room shut them down. Major General Thomas Hargrove, who'd been watching the operation unfold from the Tactical Operations Center, stood up and addressed the assembled officers. "Gentlemen, I've been in the Marine Corps for 28 years. I've seen a lot of pilots, flown with many of them, trusted my life to their skills. But what Captain Katsaros did today was something different. She didn't just follow orders or complete a mission. She read a battlefield, made tactical decisions in real time, and executed them flawlessly under pressure. She saved an entire company because she was paying attention when she didn't have to be, and because she was willing to act when no one ordered her to." He paused, looking around the room. "So here's what's going to happen. We're going to stop questioning her methods and start learning from them. We're going to recognize that sometimes the rule book matters less than the results. And we're going to make damn sure that every pilot in this theater understands that the mission is supporting Marines on the ground, not checking boxes for staff officers." The room erupted in applause. It was unprecedented, unmilitary, and absolutely genuine. Somewhere in the back, an anonymous voice shouted "Reaper," and suddenly everyone was chanting it. "Reaper, Reaper, Reaper." Captain Alina Katsaros wasn't at the briefing. She was on the flight line, conducting post-mission maintenance on her aircraft, making sure it would be ready when someone needed it again. The story spread beyond the base, beyond the province, beyond Afghanistan. News outlets picked it up. "Female pilot defies orders to save Marines." The headlines were sensationalist and mostly wrong, focusing on gender rather than competence, on controversy rather than courage. Katsaros refused all interview requests. She released a single statement through public affairs. "I was doing my job. Every pilot in theater would have done the same." But that wasn't quite true, and everyone knew it. Not every pilot had her instincts. Not every pilot had her skills. Not every pilot had her absolute refusal to let Marines die when she could prevent it. She became a symbol, whether she wanted to be or not. Young women entering military aviation programs talked about wanting to be like Reaper. Marine infantry officers requested her specifically for operations. Other A-10 pilots tried to emulate her techniques, her decisiveness, her calm under fire. The Air Force eventually caught up with the story and decided to do what the Air Force does best: turn an unconventional success into an official program. They interviewed Katsaros extensively about her decision-making process, her tactical approach, her methods for coordinating with ground forces. They turned her techniques into training materials. They held her up as an example of effective close air support. They gave her awards and commendations and promotions. Through it all, she remained the same: quiet, professional, focused on the work. She didn't give speeches about breaking barriers or proving doubters wrong. When pressed, she talked about her brother, about the promise she'd made to herself, about the sacred responsibility of being the person between the ground and the sky, the one who shows up when everything else has failed. Her final deployment came 18 months later. By then she was a major, assigned to train the next generation of A-10 pilots. But when her old squadron requested her for one last rotation, she volunteered immediately. She flew 63 missions in 4 months, each one executed with the same precision and commitment as the first. On her final flight, escorting a convoy through a particularly dangerous valley, she maintained station until every vehicle reached safety, then performed a low flyby over the lead truck, waggling her wings in farewell. The Marines watched her disappear into the sky, that ugly, beautiful aircraft growing smaller and smaller until it was just a speck against the clouds. Someone said what they were all thinking: "There goes the best pilot any of us will ever work with." Back in the States, Major Alina Katsaros was assigned to the Air Force Weapons School, teaching close air support tactics to new pilots. She was demanding, precise, and utterly intolerant of half measures. Her students were terrified of her. They also worshipped her. In the evenings, she would tell them stories about missions, not to brag but to illustrate points about timing, angles, communication, the thousand small decisions that separated a good pilot from a dead Marine. She never mentioned the headlines or the controversy or the barriers she'd broken. She talked about the work, always the work. One night, a young female lieutenant asked her what it was like being one of the few women flying combat missions in the A-10. Katsaros thought about it for a moment. "The aircraft doesn't know or care about my gender," she finally said. "The Marines on the ground don't know or care about my gender. The enemy definitely doesn't care." The only people who seemed concerned about it were the ones who never had to trust their lives to my flying. So I stopped caring what they thought and focused on being the pilot my Marines needed me to be. The lieutenant nodded, processing this. Did it get easier? The doubt, the questions, the extra scrutiny. "No," Katsaros said, "but I got better at ignoring it, and eventually the work spoke for itself." She retired after 20 years of service with the rank of lieutenant colonel, having flown more combat missions in the A-10 than almost any pilot in Air Force history. Her retirement ceremony was attended by more than 300 people, including Marines from every unit she'd supported, pilots she'd trained, and commanders who'd learned to trust her judgment. Lieutenant Colonel Vance, now a battalion commander himself, gave a speech about the day Reaper 26 had broken radio silence and saved Checkpoint 7. "She taught us that courage isn't just about flying into danger," he said. "It's about knowing when the rules matter less than the lives depending on you. It's about being willing to face consequences for doing what's right. It's about showing up when everyone else has written you off." When Katsaros stepped to the podium, she kept her remarks brief. She thanked the Marines for trusting her. She thanked her fellow pilots for teaching her. She thanked her family for supporting her. And then she said something that everyone in that room would remember. "I had a brother who called for help that didn't come. I spent 20 years making sure that didn't happen to someone else's brother, someone else's sister, someone else's child. If I accomplished nothing else, I accomplished that. And that's enough." The applause lasted 5 minutes. Strong men wept openly. It was not a military moment. It was a human one. After the ceremony, walking across the tarmac toward the parking lot, Alina Katsaros paused beside an A-10 that sat in its revetment, ugly and scarred and ready. She placed one hand on the titanium bathtub that had protected her through so many missions, feeling the metal warm from the afternoon sun. She thought about her brother, about all the brothers and sisters she'd brought home, about the promise she'd kept. Then she turned and walked away, leaving the aircraft to the next generation, to the next pilot who would hear someone calling for help and decide that nothing, not orders, not rules, not career consequences, mattered more than showing up. The sky was empty now. The radios were silent, but somewhere always someone would be in trouble. And somewhere always a pilot would break radio silence and say those magic words, "I'm coming. Stay down. Help is on the way." That was the legacy of Reaper 26. Not the awards or the headlines or the barriers broken, but the simple, profound promise. When you call, someone will answer. Someone will come. Someone will stay until you're safe. Alina Katsaros had kept that promise for 20 years. And in doing so, she taught a generation of pilots that the highest calling wasn't following orders. It was bringing people home.